They had the typical love story that one would dream of, childhood friends to lovers, but little did Tricia know what fate had in store for her. Join us as we dive into the life of Tricia Todd.
3, 2, 1. Hi, guys. Welcome back to the greatest episode of this entire podcast. Take it away.
He's overreacting. Okay. It was the 26th of April 2016. Tricia Todd spent her day with her ex-husband, Stephen Williams, and their 2-year-old daughter, Faith. Even though they were divorced after 11 years of marriage, the separation was amicable. They knew each other really well growing up. They went to school together, etc., etc. The pair were in the Air Force together as well, but after their divorce, Tricia, who was 33 at the time, left and moved to Hope Sound, Florida, with Faith. She was familiar with the area. She grew up there. She planned on becoming a registered nurse. Tricia had custody of Faith, and Stephen, she had basically full custody of Faith, and Stephen was able to visit Faith whenever he wanted to. So it wouldn't basically it hints at the fact that their divorce was perfectly good, Given that he was still in the Air Force, he could not visit as often as he'd like to, but he did whenever he had the opportunity. He visited Tricia and Faith that week in April, that day, the 26th of April. Tricia left Faith with him for the evening. The next day, Tricia was due to collect Faith from the babysitter and go to work, but she didn't show up. It wasn't like her not to. Her family went to check her house to see if she was home, but she wasn't there. Her car was outside, but not in its usual spot. It was across the street. Her purse was inside. Car there were groceries left by the doorstep. The lights were on too. She was later reported missing. Stephen, during the entire process, like police investigation, he was very cooperative. He even took a polygraph test in which he passed. The police then discovered footage from the 26th of Tricia shopping in a grocery store. Everything up until that point seemed normal. A neighbor saw Tricia leave that evening in her car, and her cell phone records revealed that she had been at the Airbnb with Stephen. He confirmed that she had been there but left after a while. Stephen told the police that Tricia was due to collect Faith the next morning, but when she didn't show up, he dropped Faith with the babysitter as he had to go to work. He had no idea where Tricia was, but he confirmed she would sometimes go out walking to connect with God. She usually did this alone, and her family did confirm that it was true. Police looked into the men in Tricia's life, and one man in particular that she seemed obsessed with, but there was nothing at all to connect him or anyone else to Tricia's disappearance. Police then began to look through Tricia's belongings, like her cell phone and a diary that she used to keep with her, to try and figure out where she may have gone. A journal revealed something that even her own family had not been aware of. While her divorce with Stephen seemed amicable and it looked like they had a good relationship, Tricia's journal revealed that Stephen had a darker side to him. He had abused Tricia in the past. He had kicked her in the stomach while she was pregnant. She was frightened of him. He even strangled 2 of her little dogs. Stephen's mother revealed that Stephen hated Tricia and wanted her to disappear. She believed he was the cause of her disappearance. So it turns out that before the polygraph test, Stephen had taken a drug in which, made him pass it. I don't know the drug name, but he did take a drug before the test. So they later found that security footage of Stephen driving both his car as well as Tricia's car that night. She disappeared. Footage also placed him at her house. Initially, he denied any involvement in the case. He repeatedly said that he had no idea where Tricia was. After further questioning, he eventually admitted to knowing something, but his story changed every time. However, one thing stood out that was very clear from the start was that Tricia was dead. At first, Stephen claimed he found Tricia dead and disposed of her body. He then claimed he accidentally killed Tricia that night, but his final confession revealed the true events of his crime. The day he spent with Tricia and Faith, the 26th of April, he spent the entire day trying to work up the courage to kill Tricia. He did not visit Florida to spend time with Faith, but to kill Tricia. When she left for the night, he asked her to come back. When she returned, he immediately knocked her unconscious. Tricia woke up and Stephen demanded her email password. He wanted to send everyone an email to say Tricia had left of her own accord. Tricia was hysterical and began screaming, and Stephen punched her again with such force that he knew it would kill her. Stephen had the entire thing planned out. He had previously bought a chainsaw in North Carolina and acid and had dug a hole in Hungryland Wildlife Reserve. When he murdered Tricia, he put her body in a trash bag and the bag into her car. That was probably the point where his plan began to unravel. There was no gas in Tricia's car, so he had to go buy some, which placed him on several security footages as well. Using the chainsaw he bought, he removed Tricia's teeth and fingertips so that she would not be identified. He dismembered her and placed her body parts in a container that had been filled with acid in an attempt to dissolve any trace of Tricia. When he was asked why he did it, he claimed he wanted full custody of Faith and he was tired of Tricia disrespecting him, and also said there were financial reasons as well. Stephen led police to where he had buried the tub containing Tricia's body parts. In exchange for revealing the location, he was charged with a lesser charge on second-degree murder and was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Tricia's death was violent and brutal. Stephen would have most probably faced the death penalty if he had not taken the plea deal.
It's interesting you have two cases that are very similar. The guy killing the girl. Then you had a case where the girl killed the guy. Skinned him alive. So
I personally didn't like this case for it being one super emotional, and some stuff just didn't make sense to me. So I've not mentioned this in the case because I honestly didn't want to put it in the case in the first place. But it was the fact that Tricia's parents, basically family members, I'm not very sure of her mother because there was no mention of her mother at all, but her father, this was not like a normal murder, right? It was gruesome and it was painful in so many levels. Okay, but he had that in himself to forgive Stephen. And it was like the highlight, like her entire family just found it in themselves to forgive Stephen. Like, be it because they've known him since as a child and stuff like that, but he was completely insane. And I don't know, I can't. Okay, so yeah, the family forgave him, which doesn't really make sense to me because it was such an easy forgiveness. Like, I know they've probably known Stephen since they were like kids and everything, and that he played a huge role in their family life and all that, but like, he killed her in the most gruesome way possible, and he had no regrets. There was not an ounce of regret in what he did. So how is that easily, like, how can one possibly easily forgive another for that? Like, so that was one thing. And also, like, if the I've also not mentioned this part, but the police officers that were in charge of the case they wouldn't have offered him this plea deal if they had known of how he had dumped her body. Like, like
Yeah, obviously.
they mhm. And they were like really disturbed by it too. So I don't know how the family just found it in themselves to forgive him. I watched this YouTube video of the family members like talking about him and like the entire interview sort of process. And her brother, who also ended up adopting Faith as their own daughter. So he basically has his biological daughter and he adopted Tricia's daughter. So in that interview, the way they described Steven, from the way they knew, he was like a golden child, like a perfect school record, a straight A student, a model citizen. That is how they've described him throughout. And like the fact that Tricia was probably the only person in his entire surrounding that knew him as this much darker person, it's really sad, because if she had like spoken up about it, or someone stumbled upon her diary, they would have known sooner. And like, I don't know, it just, even after how she described him in the journal, their parents, like her parents or her family, just didn't, feel any sort of anger or resentment. Okay, maybe they must have at first, but there was absolutely no mention of it. It was just the fact that they were so forgiving. And I don't want to like dissing their family. Like, I mean, it's a good thing that you could find peace with someone's death and all that, but at the same time, how is it humanly possible to do so? That's just how I saw this case. And like, the reason I selected it also based because it was a family-based sort of case, but also the fact that he was looked as a model citizen, and not everyone is genuinely a model citizen. There is more to someone besides what they portray in society. So,
Yeah,
and that's just felt like a
persona.
perfect example.
He has his
I mean,
own
you're in the
persona,
army.
only
Don't
someone
they do
knew.
background checks? Because at the time after their divorce, no, like I'm trying to find the entire trigger point. Because some said, like some of the articles that I read said that this was a long executed plan. So like probably took him ages to execute this entire thing. But I don't know. I'm just wondering if it could be this thing where she got a boyfriend after their divorce and maybe it triggered him. Because I don't know. Because in the YouTube interview that I watched, where the interviewer was interviewing the police and all that, he didn't really give a reason for why he murdered Tricia. I only found the reasons in a different article. So in the article it said the financial reasons and the fact that he wanted full custody. But
okay, that was the greatest episode of the podcast yet. Make sure to like and subscribe and share with your friends and hit the bell notification and upvote and like and share this with your friends if you really liked it. It was the greatest episode of the podcast we ever had, ever.
we tend to be so dramatic in our reactions.
I swear to God, it's the best episode of the podcast in the universe.
Sarcasm, even for a guy that doesn't like. Okay.
Ciao.